Delighted now to be joined by Matt Vickers, Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party. Matt, good friend of the show, thanks for joining me. Let's start, please, my friend, with what we just said to Kate, right? We can talk about, we can talk about childcare, we can talk about disability. Let's talk about your core middle England, middle-class business, voters, right? Tory supporters. By raising corporation tax, you're skewering them, aren't you?
I think you've got to look beneath the headline, Jeremy. I know that the press and the media don't like to look beneath the headline, but 75% of all businesses, their corporation tax remains unchanged. They will still only be paying 19%, which remains, even after all the changes, remains the lowest corporation tax in the G7. The only people whose corporation tax will be going up is those with the biggest profits, those who have made their largest profits, £250,000 plus. In fact, just 10% of people will be paying that 25%.
In terms of today, on the Tory backbenches, you're the Deputy Party Chairman. What's the response been? It seemed to me, and I'm not a great analyst, but it seemed to me that this was a calm, considered approach after the nightmare of Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng. Has this calmed Tory nerves? Is there a feeling that this is back to the sort of responsible government that everybody used to think the Tory government was about, the Tory party, rather?
I think, you know what, the government set itself 5 challenges and it's getting on with the job. We've looked at inflation. Already inflation, all the predictions are telling us we're moving the right way. We are going to reduce that inflation, halve that inflation. We're cutting the national debt. We're paying down the debts of all of the crises that we've had in recent years, and we're moving in the right direction on that. And we're doing what the country wants. Reducing those waiting lists in those hospitals by keeping more doctors in the NHS for longer, and what we've seen in the last week, the incredible news about the boats, taking it seriously, getting on with the job and doing what people want to do, and that's exactly where we're at, and that's exactly what Rishi is delivering for people.
Matty, I know there's 2 years to go. I know you're at HQ a lot of the time, but you would say when you look at this budget, you would say when you look at Sunak's, announcements over the last few days, Brexit, then we talked about immigration. This is all about one eye on the next election. Let me ask you something. For months and months, this government has trailed the Labour Party. Is this the beginning of a perceived comeback? Because I watched Starmer's response. I didn't think he looked at the races, to coin a Cheltenham phrase today. I thought he was wide of the mark. Is this the beginning of the Tory party fighting back, Matt Vickers?
I think we're seeing the evidence that it's same old Labour. Labour is doing what it's done all the time. We've seen £90 billion of unfunded spending commitments. They're going to spend like there's no tomorrow, as they always have. They'll get the economy into a mess again. On immigration, which is huge in my inbox, the emails I receive, the people I get coming to my surgery, they're going in completely the wrong direction. This is a guy who's voted against any measure we've brought in to toughen up our asylum system. They're going the wrong way. They're making an awful mess of it. I think we've got to deliver for people, and if we deliver for people and do what we need to do, the British public will let us carry on and deliver a bit more.
What do you say to the critics tonight? And there will be many, you can't please all the people all the time, that says you're effectively giving a tax cut to millionaire pensioners. Yet again, the Tories seem to be favouring a certain part of society in the middle of a cost of living crisis.
This is a huge challenge in our NHS, getting brilliant doctors to stay in our NHS. The tax system wasn't working on that front. We were forcing people to retire because it was costing them so much to stay on that it wasn't working. That model wasn't working. So as well as the biggest cash boost in the history of the NHS, as well as investing in those new hospitals, as well as my local mental health crisis hub in Stockton, my new diagnostic hub, we need to keep those people in place. We've recruited thousands more doctors and thousands more nurses, but the model doesn't work if we have all of these doctors retiring. We've done what we've needed to do today to get that across the line and keep those people in the NHS.
Lots of people making lots of positive comments about the increase in defence spending, $11 billion, the fuel duty frozen for the next 12 months. And many people say, final question, that the announcements, we'll talk in more detail later about childcare and disability, has really, if you like, taken the wind out of Labour's sails, because those are the very sorts of policies that the Labour Party in the past would have concentrated on. Was that a planned strategy, do you think?
I don't think it was. I think we're in a place with our economy where we've got a labour shortage now. We've got all these, record. I mean, at the beginning of the pandemic, we thought there was going to be mass unemployment. We thought we were going to have all sorts of problems. But because of what happened during the pandemic, we're actually in a place where we need more people in work. And if we can do a bit more to help people into work, for instance, the package that we're putting in place to support disabled people, to make sure they've got the support they need if they want to get back into work and are able to access the right jobs, the things. Do you know what? When I speak to people from my constituency on low incomes, who've had a child, actually that career break ends up being the end of their career because they cannot afford the huge prices of putting your children into care and getting them looked after while you're at work. This is the right thing to do to help people get on with life, get back to work and make the most of their lives. And it's also entirely the right thing to do for our economy, to fill those vacant jobs in our economy and make the use of those skills of people who've had children and want to get back into work.
Matty, always great to have you on. Looking slightly smug tonight, the Tory Vice Party Chairman. We'll let you know more. But back to College Green now. Back to Kate McCann. She's been joined by Labour's Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury, James Murray MP. Kate, over to you.
Yes, I am, Jeremy. And the big question for Labour, and James Murray joins me now, is really, James, I mean, a lot of this budget is similar stuff to what Labour has been talking about, particularly on childcare and getting people back into work. The Tories have stolen your thunder, really, haven't they?
Well, look, if the government's talking about childcare, that can only be a good thing because, as we've been saying for months and months, childcare is really important to helping people get back into work, to helping our society more widely, and the government needs to take action on childcare. Now, let's look at the detail of what they've actually said, because alongside the money, we need to see reform of childcare, because we know it's not just about throwing money at the system. We also need to make sure that the system is there and works properly in terms of having childcare providers, the right number of staff, making sure that if you give free hours, it doesn't just push up the costs of additional hours or additional services and so on. So what my colleague Bridget Phillipson, the Shadow Education Secretary, is doing is working on her reforms by talking to people around the world, experts in the field, other countries who do childcare better than we do in the UK. And that's the kind of reform we really need for the long term.
Yeah, but I suppose the reality is for the Labour Party, sitting in the House of Commons today, listening to that budget, it's quite difficult for you to come up with anything alternative, because a lot of what the Conservative government is saying is things that Labour has already proposed. So where's the difference between the two parties at the moment?
Well, look, there are some individual measures which have Labour's fingerprints on them. If you think about the energy price cap and so on, there are things that we've been calling for a long time, and it's great to see some of that in the budget. But actually, take a step back from individual measures. What the country really needs is a plan for growth over the coming years. We've had 13 years of low growth. Growth forecasts were downgraded today by the Office of Budget Responsibility. What we need is a plan for growth, and that's what we didn't see from the government. We didn't see a plan that's really going to grow our economy, and that's where our alternative comes in. Where we would invest in the green industries of the future, transform our economy, our modern industrial strategy, working in partnership with business. That's the kind of solid, credible plan that we need to get the economy growing again.
But the reality of those policies is that they require a lot of investment. It requires a lot of extra cash that the government doesn't have. The Office for Budget Responsibility today is saying that the headroom the government has left after this budget, which actually does very little in terms of big spending announcements, is the smallest headroom that they've seen of any recent budget. They're quite worried about that. So Labour doesn't have the cash to do very much more, do you?
Well, what we've set out is our fiscal rules, and Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, has been absolutely clear about this.
But just on that specific point, so forgive me for interrupting you, but on that specific point, Labour doesn't have the money to do big things. That's the reality, isn't it?
Well, the biggest thing that we promised, the biggest commitment we've made, is to invest in that green transition, so investing in green technologies of the future, and that's a £28 billion a year investment for 10 years. Now, that money fits within our fiscal framework, because we said within our fiscal framework, day-to-day spending must be fully funded through tax receipts, debt must be falling as a proportion of GDP, and only once those other fiscal rules are met can we then borrow to invest. But what Rachel Reeves, Shadow Chancellor, says is that a good Chancellor needs to know obviously when to say no, but they also need when to invest for the future, and that's where our plans come from to transform the economy.
One of the biggest criticisms that the Conservative government is facing today is that they have chosen to prioritise some things over others, including a pensions tax break for some pretty wealthy people, albeit with the aim of trying to keep doctors in work. But what they haven't done is announced any more cash for nurses or GPs or doctors. Would Labour be prepared to give nurses the pay rise that they're asking for?
Well, look, what we've said throughout the dispute that the nurses have been having with the government, and indeed in all industrial disputes which are going on at the moment, is the government needs to sit down around the negotiating table and come up with a deal with the trade unions representing those different workers in different sectors, because no one wants to see strikes go ahead, and the government should be doing everything it can to sit down with representatives of workers, try and strike deals to avoid strikes going ahead. That's what they should be doing. Now, on the point around the one permanent tax cut which was in today's budget, which is this tax cut for the top 1% of earners, there's a real question mark about whether that's value for money, because they say this is to help doctors get back into work. Well, why not just help doctors? Why have this blanket change, which is going to cost £1 billion a year? And actually, if you look at bringing people back into work, that will cost £70,000 per person brought back into work. There's a real question there about whether that's value for money.
Yeah. James Murray from the Labour Party, thank you so much.